Now then, how are you doing? I hope you're well. I love a snow scene, mostly because it's an opportunity to create a little bit of magic with very few brushstrokes. But it does come with its own challenges. On the one hand, it's all about making the white paper work for you. Lose your backlight and you lose your luminosity. On the other hand, it's also about making the snow look convincing and suitably three-dimensional. To achieve that means applying shadows in such a way as to explain the snow's three-dimensional properties. I like to call it snow sculpting. As always, the full project is available to those who subscribe to my online student service. It features the full-length uncut version of this painting demonstration, a step-by-step breakdown and a guide to painting it yourself. More information on how to access all that will be available at the end and in the video description below. In the meantime, let's get sculpting that snow. This snowy woodland is in Andalsnes in Norway. Despite the complex tree patterns in the background, it's a relatively simple composition. A snow-covered tree and a whole heap of freshly fallen snow, perfect for my purposes. The first job, of course, is to draw the scene out in pencil. The objective is to try and create something that is as simple as possible, concentrating on the outlines of the major elements in order to size them up and position them accordingly. One of the things I'm doing is to establish some of the shapes of the snow clinging to the large tree trunk in the foreground. Once I'm satisfied with my drawing, it's time to mix up a light blue-grey from French ultramarine and burnt umber. I'm going to use this to initially break my scene down into two tones. The light tone will naturally be the snow. There are several dark tones, most notably the bark of the tree as glimpsed through the snow that's sticking to it, and the small occasional glimpses of rocks peeping out from under the snow that they're buried under. There are shadows too, which help to explain the three-dimensional shape of the snow surface. this point, reduced to contrasting monochromatic shapes in this way, the scene should hopefully be explaining itself reasonably coherently. Now I can start getting down to the nitty-gritty of painting in some of those darker tones, starting with the glimpses of tree bark through the gaps in the snow. The most important thing is to avoid creating any repetitive patterns or anything too angular or geometric. This is meant to be snow after all, and the shapes should be as random as possible if the effect is to look natural. I must confess, up until this point, I've been undecided about what I want to do with the background. My original plan was to keep things as minimalist as I could, and that included the mood that I wanted to convey, keeping everything, including the sky, as cool and downbeat as possible. However, it's now decision time, and I'm afraid I simply couldn't resist the temptation to inject some subtle warmth into the scene, in the form of a wet in wet wash consisting of cadmium yellow, cadmium red and French ultramarine. Because my board is set at a gentle angle, I'm effectively letting gravity do all the work for me. The secret is in the timing. Apply your colours too early and you'll have little or no control. Apply them too late and they won't blend together at all. Instead, you're more likely to get hard edges or worse. If you remember how it all looked after the first wash, when a single colour was enough to visually explain the scene, well, even though there are now more colours present and a few more details, the concept of having suitable contrasts within the composition is still crucial to its success. Choosing the correct values for different elements within a scene is something that comes with practice. My general advice would be, if in doubt, keep it light. It's easier to make things a little darker, should they need to be, than it is to try and roll it back and make them lighter. Variation is important too. Here I'm applying the background trees with French ultramarine, but then I'm changing to a warm mix of cadmium yellow and cadmium red. By doing that, it helps to reinforce that warm glow. It just keeps things interesting. At which point I'm going to revert back to the blue-grey, mixed from French ultramarine and burnt umber, and start building up the shadows, some of which I will leave hard edged, while others I will soften off with the damp brush. It's time to start adding the darkest tones, mixed from, well, you've guessed it, French ultramarine and burnt umber. Mostly for this I'm going to be working to my original pencil guidelines and the earlier dark tones. This mix, which is rich and quite thick, is intended to create accents and extra impact here and there. To maintain realism and visual interest, I'm also going to lighten it in places by softening it off with a damp brush and build into it a smattering of extra details wherever it feels appropriate. It's also worth remembering that tone is relative. So by placing an extreme dark tone next to a white highlight makes that white highlight seem much brighter in comparison. Finally, in acknowledgement of that warm glow, I'm going to add a hint of cadmium yellow to a few selected patches of snow. Snow doesn't have much colour of its own to speak of, but it does have a tendency to reflect ambient colours when they are present. Well, I hope you enjoyed that and that it may have given you a few ideas of your own. Remember, the longer, full-length, uncut version is available along with step-by-step guides and project notes in my online student service. For full details on how to subscribe to that service, simply visit my website at peterwoolley.co.uk and select Online Tuition from the main menu. Until next time, take care.